Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a preview for a brand new upcoming game. This is called Wishland. It is from Lost Games, and it puts you in the role of a business owner trying to start a theme park. It is a worker placement game, one of our favorite genres of games.
Yeah, we've seen this theme in a couple different ways before, but the worker placement thing, like you said, is definitely in our wheelhouse. And this is a very straightforward worker placement game with a lot of different things to consider with all these cards.
All right, so as we say with any of these, this is a Kickstarter prototype, so make sure you guys check out their Kickstarter page for all the final components. However, let me start digging into the game right away. It's going to take place over 7 different rounds that are noted up here at the top of the track. Each of these rounds is broken into 4 turns, so you're going to have 28 different actions to take in the game. Actions are basically using your workers to take a worker placement action or pulling all of your workers back into your pool. So there are times where you have to give up an action to get all your workers back. They never come back naturally, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, the worker placement in this is a little unique. We thought we knew what it was like when we first started playing, but learned very quickly that it's quite a bit different. These workers are almost like resources as you're spending them, because you can go to different locations with one worker. But if there's already a pile there, even if it's yours, it's going to take more workers with each additional pile that's placed there to place more workers there. So no one's ever blocked out unless you've run out of workers. And like Jeremy said, if you're out of workers, your action that turn is to take all of your workers back.
Speaking of workers, each player is going to start with 4 workers. You're going to have 6 possible extra workers that you can collect from the bottom of the board down here through a wide variety of different actions. So you can have more workers throughout the course of the game. There are 6 different worker placement actions on the board. 5 of them that are correlated to the cards in the game, which are each broken down into different categories, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then you have an advertisement square where you can go to that's going to allow you to basically collect money, and then one of either happiness, visitors, or extra workers. The whole game revolves around the cards, though. These cards are what you're going to be collecting in your tableau and then building up in order to get kind of a small little engine going that's going to allow you to do very unique things from your opponent. These cards are broken into 5 different types, and we'll talk about these right now. Your very first row are your rides. Now, these rides are always going to give you an X number of victory points. Each card, or the anatomy of each card, works basically the same. You have a cost in the upper left-hand corner. You have some kind of icon on the bottom left, which is going to basically act towards victory points for mascots, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then you have what the card does on the bottom. In the case of rides, they're all victory points. So the more victory points, or more money you typically spend for them, the more victory points that you're going to collect. Rides also have another purpose. Along with your ticket office, which every player will start with, rides will stack on top of your ticket offices. So this could be a collection of rides and ticket offices. Each one of these is going to tell you however many of the other types of 4 cards that you can have in your tableau. So if you have just a single ticket office, you can only have 1 blue card, 1 red card, 1 green card, and 1 black mascot. However, if you have a stack of 2, that allows your card limitation to go up to 2. So the more of these that you stack, the more of these cards that you can have in your tableau.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing that regulates the cards that you have in front of you. You can't just go willy-nilly and take as many blue cards as you want. You always have to go back and get some of those rides or potentially some of the ticket offices. The next row are the characters. Now, like the rides, these have a couple different purposes. The anatomy is the same, except the action that you take is going to be related to the happiness and the visitors and potentially the workers that you can grab. When you see these symbols right here, that means you're going to be able to go up on the visitor track 3 times, take 3 workers, get 1 happiness. That's how these effectively work. One other thing on these cards is this icon in the lower right-hand corner of each. This is going to be part of a set collection at the end of the game. You're going to score blue cards depending on the full variety of those types of icons that you have. So if you've collected all of one icon, it's not so great, but if you've collected one of each, you're going to score a lot of points.
There's another thing going on with these blue cards you have to pay attention to. As David already mentioned, you have a happiness track and you have a visitor track. Each of these have odd number spaces that you're going to collect something. So every odd number that you hit in happiness, you're going to gain a victory point. Every odd number that you hit in visitors, you're going to collect $2. And also there is a bonus if you reach the 10 at the end. At the end of the game, if you've reached those, you get some final scoring. One of them is going to allow you to gain a victory point for every 5 of the particular color cards that you have, and the other one's going to allow you to collect a victory point for every 5 of money production that you have at the end of the game. Speaking of money production, the third cards are the restaurants. These are what are going to allow you to collect money. Now, there's 2 different types of cards in here. There are cards that are just going to add to your production value every turn. At the start of every single one of the rounds, each player is going to collect 5 money. However, if you have these cards, you would collect additional money according to what you have in your particular engine. And there's also cards that give you an influx of immediate money. That's going to give you $4, but it gives you a negative victory point at the end of the game. Next, you have hotels.
Yeah, the hotels are where the engine building happens. These are a wide range of cards and all individual and all with very unique powers. These are going to be things that you add to your tableau, and they're going to have impacts either ongoing, immediate impacts, or potentially end of game scoring. For instance, this one here is going to allow me to, whenever I take happiness or visitors or workers, I can choose which I want to take. So if I take a card that says I'm taking visitors, but I've already tapped out the visitor track, I can actually instead take workers instead, or happiness.
Yeah, you have a card here too that's going to allow you to collect a victory point for every set of the 5 different colors, whereas this one, it's the same color. So you can get some variation in the way you can possibly score points at the end game, all done through these hotels. The final are the mascots. Now, the mascots are always going to cost you $3, and they always have an icon in the bottom of the card itself. These are going to relate to all these different icons that you see on all the different cards. Each one of these that you have, say for instance I have this guy and he's just going to show a shake there. I get a half a point for every card that I have a shake on. So if I have 2 cards, I get a single point. And you can't stack these. So if I have 2 of these, it's going to give me 1 point for every one of these cards I've collected at the end of the game that has a shake. So those are the basic cards. How do you play the game? So the game is, like we said, going to be broken down into 4 different actions on your turn. The very first thing that happens is, starting with the first player, which is represented by this token, that player gets to choose which one of these 5 different actions they wish to place their hat. Now, when they place their hat, they're going to get that bonus immediately. That can be either $1, a victory point, maybe happiness, maybe a visitor, or even additional ticket offices. Once each of the players in turn order has determined that, that is actually going to determine the turn order for the rest of the round. So it's not particularly who has this, that just allows you to pick first.
Right, so if you're going to forego any of the bonuses, you're going to be able to go first. Of course, if you've taken a look at the cards available for that round, it may be important for you to go first.
Then each player is going to collect $5, which can again be mitigated by any of the red restaurants that you have in your tableau. Then you start the worker placement actions. As David alluded to, this is really the crux of the game and how the ebb and flow is going to work. When you place one of your workers, it can be in any one of these 5 worker placement spots or the advertisement spot. If it's an empty spot, you just place your worker there. No harm, no foul. It's very easy. You pay the cost of the card. You do whatever it says on it immediately. You have to make sure that you have the limit in your theme park to be able to hold that card. And then it goes to the next player. Now, say David wants to go to the spot. That's where the trick comes in.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to place 2 workers here because this is the second pile of workers there. So he had 1. If I'm going to place there, I have to place 2. If someone on a following turn wants to place there, they're going to have to place 3 of their workers. So like we said, these workers are like resources. And what's interesting is the more workers you put out, the sooner you're going to run out of workers, and the sooner you're going to have to use one of your turns to collect all your workers back.
And it's important to note that even includes if you were in that location. So if I want to come back to this location, there's 2 piles in there. I even consider my own pile. So I would have to place 3 workers to be able to take that particular action. Now remember, there's times in the game when you're going to be out of workers. Then you can pull all of your guys back as your action. And there are only 4 actions that you can take in each of the individual rounds.
What's interesting too is you can pull your workers back before you're out of workers as well. The timing becomes very interesting between rounds because there's going to be times where you have maybe half or more of your workers out at the end of a round, and you're going to start your next round with only maybe a couple of workers. That can be to your disadvantage, and sometimes it can be to your advantage because you've effectively clogged up a lot of spots, so all the other players that are placing have to put more workers out.
Yep. Now there's a couple of other interesting things in the game you need to note as well. These mascots are not only going to give you victory points at the end of the game, but each one that you collect is going to give you something when you collect it. Now there's a chart going to be in the bottom right hand portion of the board that tells you the first mascot that you collect is going to give you a single coin. The second one that you collect is going to give you something else, so they gradually get better through the course of the game. The second thing that you have to pay attention into this in this game are the achievements, which we've kind of glossed over. There's a number of different achievements here that are basically a race. It's a first come, first serve, and the first person to collect them is going to get a victory point and lock other players out.
Yeah, this is not an extremely high scoring game, so 1 point here and 1 point there can really make the difference. difference. And these are all of the usual suspects. The first person to get 5 of any one color card is covered right here. And then there's ones that cover certain positions on the happiness track and the visitor track. And then one right here for the first person who just happens to get to 15 points.
And once all 7 rounds are done, you're going to add up your points. Of course, any of the victory points that you've scored through the course of the game are going to be added in. And then there's a variety of other victory points that you can score. One of those are the mascots, which you've already mentioned. These are going to give you half points for correlating those icons with the different cards that you've collected in your tableau. Then, as David alluded to, you have the set collection.
Yeah, the set collection is all about those blue cards. So you're going to look at the variety, the number of different icons you have in the lower right-hand corner of each of the blue cards, and then look at this chart down here to determine how many points you're going to score that way. People can score points that way. Some other players may not have gone that route, and they're going to have to get their points elsewhere.
Remember, there's also the 2 tracks. If you've reached the 10 on both of these positions, on this track, if I have 5 red cards, I get a victory point. If I have 5 green cards, I get a victory point. Down here, it's for every production of 5 that you've met. So you naturally have 5 production at the start of the game, but if I have these 2 cards, which equal to 5, that's another victory point that you collect.
Yeah, and one other thing, this has nothing to do with final scoring, but speaking of tracks and unlocking things, once you've taken all of your workers off of this space, it opens up an interesting ability, and that's to use excess workers for discounts on any of these spaces. So once you have all of your workers off of that chart, you're going to be able to place the required workers in a spot, 1 in this case, and then up to 3 more workers on top of them in order to get an up to $3 discount on the card that you take.
And remember, there's one final place, the green cards. Some of these can have in-game scoring points. Some of them obviously give you production. Some of them are going to give you instant bonuses. So that is Wishland. This is a pretty cool game. Like, the first time we played it, we didn't realize how important the timing was in this game. Like, you have to make sure that you're pulling off your workers at the right time, because there could be chances where you could start the round, you could be the first player, but you have no workers to place.
Yeah, we're big fans of worker placement. We're probably even bigger fans of worker placement where you can get out of phase with the other players at the table, because it really adds a whole nother layer of strategy to worker placement in general.
So that's Wishland. If you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Make sure you guys go to the Kickstarter page to see all the final components, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.